we go. Thank you so much for being here to start our second session on forms. Last week, we went over consumer notice and buyer's agency agreement. And this week we are heading into the agreement of sale. So I'm going to get out of there and jump in here. Move this around. There we go. So is this big enough? There's no one. It's kind of meta here because I've got this going on behind me. If somebody shows up here in person, I wanted to have that up and running. But anyway, thank you so much, Mike, for being here as usual, you guy. The first thing, I'm going to have wacky hair here because I have to have my glasses on. Page 1 of the standard agreement for the sale of real estate. I'm just going to use my cursor here to show you. I typically save these in the acronym that PAR has assigned for this. So when I save them in either .loop or DocuSign, I save them by cutting this name down a little bit. You see here up as well. But we're going to start here on page 1. This is kind of like the info sheet, if you will, that is utilized by settlement as well as the lender and also the abstractor, the individual that's going to be pulling and doing the title search. I want to preface this by saying I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. This is general knowledge of the agreement of sale. If you have any legal questions regarding this document, you need to counsel your client to consult with an attorney. You as a realtor can also call the PAR. If you are a realtor, a member of the board, you can contact the PAR legal hotline for questions regarding this contract. So I will absolutely try my best to give information here on how we fill this out. But just keep in mind, I'm not ever trying to give legal advice, just general knowledge of how we complete the form. So page 1, let me just preface this also by saying it's kind of a pet peeve of mine and super important to fill this out as completely as possible. There are other people. Mike has worked with me for a while now, and he knows that I say, follow the bouncing ball. Where is this contract going? Who else is looking at this? Make sure that if it starts with you, that it is complete so that other people that are going to be handling this document don't have questions down the road. So first things first, you're going to complete the buyer's side here. Typically when you're filling this out, you are the buyer's agent most of the time, but sometimes you could be on the seller's side. That's a totally different story, but you want to make sure that you've got the buyer's names as they are going to want to appear on title and in, in the deed and oftentimes in the loan. So you want to make sure that you've got the exact name of the buyer here, as well as their address. Then you've got the seller side. When you're the buyer's side and you are filling this out, you want to make sure that you are putting the seller's names as they appear, either on the county side or as they're being noted, maybe even in the MLS. So if you've got an LLC or a power of attorney, make sure you're consulting with the right people, that you have it spelled out exactly as it should be. And the seller's mailing address, if you have that. Maybe the seller doesn't live in the property, so you may not have that every time.
Quick question on all of this. Thank you. All right, so I'm on the seller's side. Buyer's agent sends me the form, but they put the wrong name in somehow for my seller. I don't know how they did it, screwed up, or they don't have the address. But everything, the rest of the documents are completed. Should I then put in .loop and correct that, put in the right names and send it back to buyer's agent?
So when you're volleying back and forth paperwork, if there's a correction, or if there's something different. First of all, if there's something different in the county website than what actually is the seller's name, like if there's a POA or whatever, try to put that in your agent remarks so that anybody writing an offer should know. Or if they call you and say, hey, we're bringing an offer, just say, hey, please make sure the seller is listed like this. Okay. That being said, if it gets to you and it's incorrect, I oftentimes just like to correct it really fast, have your client initial it and send it back. But if you just now are getting the document and maybe highest and best is in, 24, 48 hours, I would send it back to the agent and say, hey, please fix this, correct this. This is actually the seller proper.
Gotcha.
There's no one way to do it. So you just want to be in good communication with the other side, just telling them that that's what you're doing. And oftentimes, if you have paperwork that says that that's how it should be, sometimes I will just share that. If there's like, a notice or even from a court order or from estate paperwork or whatever, this is exactly who is selling it. This is the name. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, section 2 under property, we're going to put the address here. So here in this line, you will be putting, the street address. Often on this line, I put the city and the state, and then the zip over here. The municipality, I'm kind of a goofball, and I always put, 14th Ward, Pittsburgh. Even though it's city of Pittsburgh. But if it is a municipality, you want to make sure that you're checking that it's the correct one, that it's Churchill Borough or Wilkinsburg or, Mount Lebanon or whatever. Even though the mailing address might say Pittsburgh, you might be in a specific municipality. You want to also confirm the school district. While we're open here, I'm just going to share, if you aren't already aware of the county website, you're going to want to bookmark it. This is super important. I'm just going to, let's see,
1301.
and whoops. So this is going to give you, the municipality. It's going to give you the parcel ID number if it's in Allegheny County. It's going to give you the deed page, the deed book, and all that. So I just want people to bookmark that. The Allegheny County Real Estate Portal is a huge resource for most of the information that you're going to need here. I also have bookmarked here. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, here it is. The Pittsburgh zoning map. So if it is city of Pittsburgh, I'm a stickler for putting the zoning on the contract as well. So you'll want to bookmark this and utilize this quite a bit. I'll put this same address in here. If it's not city of Pittsburgh, you're not going to get the exact zoning. If it's municipality outside the city, you're going to have to check those zoning maps. But be aware too, that as long as the property is majority single family residential, you should have no problem putting, single family residential in zoning, but we'll talk more about that when we get to that page. I just want y'all to be aware of the zoning map as well as the county website as a resource for filling out your paperwork. So you've got school district here, you've got county here, the tax ID number can be found also in the MLS on the tax section. I don't copy and paste it from the agent section because sometimes that's just data entry and that can be incorrect. But I often just reference the tax ID number from the county site. So I would go here. If this was the property, I would put this parcel ID as the tax ID. Some people do a little bit different, but that's how I do it. Then on this line here, I always try to find the deed book, deed page. I often don't put the parcel number because I've already put it up here, but I type in here, deed book, and then I'll go to the county and I will copy and paste this into the line here. The reason why it's important to do this, and again, you want to think about who has their hands on this document, who is going to be needing this information. And specifically the title abstractor, this is a real person that's down at the county and is pulling and doing your title search for you. So it helps them a lot. If you go ahead and put the deed book and the deed page in here, they can just go right to that. It's real books. And real huge, ledgers that are all over. So that's super helpful to put that in there, as well as the recording date. And all that can be found again here in the real estate portal. So you've got deed book, deed page, and recording date. Sometimes recording date might not be on there, so you can leave that blank, but try to fill out as much as you can. Then we've got the first section here that's basically naming the players. It's saying who is part of this transaction. So as you can see here, I have saved this document as a template already with my brokerage information on here. So you've got Keller Williams exclusive. Here's where your name will go. Our broker's number is RB067473. My license number is here. You will put yours. Our office address, which will be changing soon.
So
And then
for right now, if we fill out a contract, are we using
Yes,
this address, the new
Yeah.
address, or the temporary
this
address?
is the address that's currently with West Penn.
Okay, so we didn't change that.
5425.
Okay, thank you.
Then we've got the direct phone number. I've got my cell number, and then we've got the company phone number here, the fax number here, my email address here, or your email address. Keep in mind, unless you're listing here the type of agent that you're being in this transaction, if you are doing a transaction with another brokerage, a different brokerage, you're obviously just the buyer's agent. You are not dual agent. We are buyer agent with designated agency, so you will always click this middle one here. If you're acting as a transactional licensee, you will leave these blank and you will click this one only. If you do not have a relationship with the seller, this is a really important thing to note. If your buyer is purchasing or for sale by owner, or if this is maybe even an off-market property and all you're doing is representing the buyer, you will click this box here saying that you have no relationship with the seller. So then this can just be blank. But oftentimes, if you are acting as dual agent, you will have the same information here and here and here and here. And then you will make sure to be clicking dual, 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 dual. Also be aware that our broker of record, Michael McGavisk, is often is a broker of record for other Keller Williams offices. So you're going to want to confirm that with us here, which offices that is the case. So just contact us and we can, keep you in the loop on how that's going. Now, I want to point out here from the seller's agent side, you may not know if their office is just seller agent where all company licensees represent the seller, or whether or not they're designated agency. I typically, if it's Howard Hanna, it's always all representing, but I thought that was the case. And then I had an agent come back to me and say, nope, I am designated agent. And she said, that's definitely a correction. So you can ask the listing agent here. Oftentimes I put, when I have a new listing in the MLS, I put in there that seller agent with designated agency. I put in the comments, the agent comments, the private comments rather, please on agreement, mark seller agent with designated agency. That way you don't have to answer that question down the road. The last box here is dual and or designated agency. This is important because as a dual agent, you must have the permission of all parties. So once everybody signs this, they are basically agreeing that they understand that you're being a dual agent. I take it a step further. If I am dual agent, I make sure that I've got something in writing, in an email or whatever, that the buyer accepts that, the seller accepts that, and they understand that I'm representing both sides. Then you're going to always want to make sure that you've got initials set up here with your buy side and your sell side. When you are processing documents, regardless of the side that you're on, before any documents go to the lender or to settlement, you want to proof your documents and make sure that they are fully executed. One of our preferred vendors, Elite Closings, title agent there, Becky Offit, has said multiple times in classes that we've taught together that one of the biggest things that they see in terms of errors is that they get contracts that aren't fully executed. So unless all of these pages are initialed by all parties, you do not have a fully executed document. And technically, the last signature and initial or date or anything that's on here is the date of execution. So then the next day, the next calendar day would be when your timelines begin. Do you have any questions over page 1? All righty, moving on. Page 2 is where we start getting into the meat of your offer. You always want to make sure that you're dating it here on the first line. And then you've got the purchase price here. So if I type into, whoops, 200,000, it automatically, oh, it's supposed to, but it didn't. It's acting foolish. It will fill that out for me here. I think DocuSign might be a little bit different. I'm still a .loop gal, so you want to type that in here. Oh, I know what it is. That's why I'm being a dork. That's why. So I've got a number amount here, and then it auto fills out the written portion, almost like when you handwrite a check. Line number 7 is where you're putting the hand money, which we also call escrow deposit or earnest funds. Technically, they have, according to the contract, 5 days to have that in. But as realtors, we try to get that in and deposited within 48 hours. The reason being, in my opinion, is that couple of reasons is that you may have a contract that's executed on a Wednesday or and then the timelines start, or on a Tuesday, timelines start Wednesday morning, and then your 5 days ends on a Sunday. If they drop it off on the weekend, it's not being deposited until Monday. So you've now missed your first contractual timeline. The timelines go in order here. And so your first obligation and most important when you execute a contract is to get the hand money in on time. So you want to be really mindful of the calendar. You want to be mindful of holidays, banking holidays, office holidays that are going to affect our ability to get this deposit in on time. If you know that you're going to miss that timeline, notify the other side, explain why, and file a change in terms addendum to extend it. Otherwise, you are putting your buyer at risk for forfeiting their hand money due to non-compliance down the road in the contract. So if you need more time, the only reason why I think I would need more time here is if my buyers are out of town or they're on vacation, or they're leaving on vacation or some other such, but otherwise you want to try to get that in 48 hours. Here's where you would put the amount. So let's just say $5,000. Sometimes you may have additional deposits. I think in 6 years, I've only had that happen maybe twice. And this third blank here, I've never had to use. So just keep that in mind. All funds paid by buyer, including deposits, can be paid or will be paid by check, cashier's check, or wired funds. We also have earnest, which we've talked about in our meetings as being used. That would be similar to wired funds. All funds paid by the buyer within 30 days of settlement, including funds paid at settlement, will be by cashier's check or wired funds. So if you have additional funds that are due within 30 days of settlement, they need to be a cashier's check or wire. It cannot be a personal check. Paragraph C is telling us like who is keeping the earnest money, meaning who is responsible for the escrow funds. Often here in Western PA, it is custom that earnest funds are held with broker for the buyer. So that's why you see that I've inserted that here as part of my template. These forms are statewide, and in central PA and east all the way through Philly, it's broker for the seller that holds the hand money. So just keep that in mind. That's why it's defaulted to say that. So it just, says here broker for seller unless otherwise stated. So in my template, I have broker for buyer : Keller Williams exclusive. It's also stating here that the deposit will be retained rather, in an escrow account in conformity with state laws. So that's just, or until termination. Down through the contract, it will then talk more about default and termination and how hand money can be refunded back to whomever feels that it's due to them. Paragraph 3 is seller assist. A seller assist is when you're able to negotiate, or if you're asking for the seller to help cover closing costs, or cash to close, if you will, for a buyer. Depending upon the type of loan they have, there is a maximum amount. So I encourage you to speak with our preferred vendor, Todd Stainbrook with AJM, if you have questions regarding seller assist and what it is. In this case, again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm also not a loan officer. So I would just encourage you to, be the source of the source, which is what I'm saying, is to talk to a good lender and have them define this for you. Also, Google's free. You can look that up as well to help define what exactly is seller assist. But again, just be mindful that you can't just put any old number here. There is a maximum amount based on the type of loan that they have, how much money they're putting down. Is it FHA conventional? So you want to be in close communication with the lender for this information. Settlement and possession. This is your settlement date. You want to be mindful of this date, thinking ahead for things like, is it a holiday? If it's a banking holiday, settlement may not be open those days. So you want to be just really careful with that. Before you put a date in there, you want to try to communicate with the seller and seller's agent rather, and make sure that it's a date that seems doable for them. Maybe they need more time. It's always a good opportunity to have a conversation with the listing agent. That's one of my things that I do, is I call them when an offer is going to be written up, and I just say, hey, we want to bring the best offer. Do your sellers need a certain amount of time? Are they in a rush? Oftentimes, if the property is vacant, you can maybe do a quicker timeline, which is helpful. It just bolsters your agreement. It helps you put your best foot forward when you're making an offer. You also want to be mindful to talk to your clients and make sure, hey, before we put this date in here, are you going to be on vacation? Are all the parties going to be in town? This is also a good time to be making sure, maybe if you have an out-of-state buyer, are they going to be in town for closing? That's an important piece of information that you're going to want to know as you're presenting an offer, and going through the process of a transaction. Is, are you then going to need to facilitate an out-of-state closing, or a closing that's, not everyone at the table together? Paragraph 4, settlement and possession. So we're going to go through all of these one at a time. I think it's really important to dig into these and understand what all of these mean. So you're adding a settlement date here, on or before. So let's read that together. Settlement date is blank or before, if buyer and seller agree. So if it's possible to close earlier, you don't have to fill out a change in terms and move the date. You're allowed to close early if it's agreeable to everybody. So the contract states this date or before. Keep in mind, if you try to do an earlier closing, I kind of lovingly refer to it as herding of cats, because you have a lot of people involved. So don't just think that because everybody wants to close early, meaning the buy side and the sell side, that it's doable for all parties. You want to make sure that you talk to the lender, that it's doable for the lender, because they have very specific timelines to meet, as well as settlement. Are they open? Are they available? Do they have availability that day to do closing? So again, it's the herding of cats and making sure that everyone is available that day. Paragraph 4B says settlement will occur in the county where the property is located or in an adjacent county during normal business hours unless buyer and seller agree otherwise. Paragraph C, at the time of settlement, the following will be prorated on a daily basis between buyer and seller, reimbursing where applicable current taxes, rents, interest on mortgage assumptions, condo fees and homeowner association fees, water and or sewer fees, together with any other lienable municipal service fees. All charges will be prorated for the period covered. Seller will pay up to and including the date of settlement. So just because you may close at 9 o'clock in the morning, it doesn't matter. The seller owes through the end of the closing date. And buyer will pay for all days following settlement unless otherwise stated here. So if you see here, I'm not a big fan of empty blanks. So I will just put agreed or whatever. You know, I was taught that. If maybe that's not correct, that's just what I was taught to do. So I just want to focus here real quick and explain to you that these prorations are what you're going to see on the settlement statement, which we call the HUD or the ALTA or settlement statement, is that if the taxes are paid through September 1st, or I'm sorry, through the full calendar year and you close on September 1st, September 2nd is when the buyer will be reimbursing the seller back for the taxes that have been paid. So it's just important to note that if there's anything, any changes to that, you would want to put that here. Like maybe, I don't know, let me see here. Part of your offer could be, you know, that you'll reimburse the seller for a full year of homeowner association dues or whatever. But that's where that would go here. Paragraph 4D is for purposes of prorating real estate taxes. The periods covered are as follows. So the first one is municipal tax bills for all counties and municipalities in Pennsylvania follow a calendar year. So keep in mind that here in PA, we have 3 taxing entities. You've got the municipality, you've got the county, and you have the school district. So you have 3 taxing entities. So what they're saying here is the municipal bill as well as the county is on a calendar year, January 1 through December 31. School tax bills for Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and Scranton school districts are for the period of January 1 through December 31st. School tax bills for all other school districts are for the period of July 1 through June 30th. That's called a fiscal calendar, not a regular calendar year, fiscal calendar. So prorations will look very different if you're closing on a property in Churchill Borough or Edgewood Borough. Their taxes for the school district, which is usually the meatiest part of the taxes, it's usually the highest tax portion of the 3, will be July 1 through June 30th. So when you're doing a cost sheet or when you're doing a seller net sheet, you want to make sure that you're calculating your prorations correctly based on these dates. Conveyance, so paragraph 4E. If you have any questions about how to fill out a net sheet, that's a whole other class. And we will always be having those somewhat regularly. But if you ever have any questions on how to do that, just contact me or Doug or you know, a seasoned agent that you might be friendly with. They can help you with that. I've also asked for help on that from my preferred settlement company, which is Becky at Elite. 4E, conveyance from seller will be by fee simple deed of special warranty, otherwise stated here. Sometimes you may see a different type of deed in the private remarks of a corporate owned property, bank owned property, foreclosure, HUD property, things like that. Simply because they can't assure a certain type of deed can be issued. So just make sure that you are checking that if there's something different. Otherwise, just have agreed here. Payment of transfer taxes will be divided equally between buyer and seller unless otherwise stated here. In the city of Pittsburgh or anywhere rather, you can check. There is a transfer tax website here. Oh, I don't want to lose this page. Let me go up here. And you can see all my bookmarks up here. This is the Allegheny County deed transfer tax. This shows you how much the municipality is. The county is 1%. And so then you've got the municipality here, let's say Aleppo is 0.5% and the school district is 0.5%. So combined with the county of 1% plus 0.5 and 0.5, you've got 2% transfer tax split 50-50. So it's 1% on each side. If you go further down, you will see that the city of Pittsburgh is 2% here and 0.5%. I don't even think this is updated because the city of Pittsburgh is actually 2, 3. It's higher. It's higher than this. So I need to check this as a matter of fact, if this is the correct. Hold on. Hold on 1 second. Because I think there we go. I think this is the most up-to-date one. Yes, it is. I'm sorry. That old one was in there. But let me just go here and go down to Pittsburgh City. Yeah, that's why, because that one's up. So 3% for the city, plus 1% for the school district, plus 1% for the county. So it's 5% transfer tax, split 50-50. So 2.5% of a $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 house is a lot of money. So you need to be knowledgeable for this. So if you want the link for local tax rates, you can Google that. But if you want this link, feel free to text me or email me and I'll send you the link to that. I need to delete this old one here. Cut, get him out of there. All right. So I'm no longer using that. This is just very important to note with transfer taxes when you have a buyer that might be cash strapped or low on cash, that if they're coming from out of state or they're brand new buyers, first time buyers, they may not know about the transfer tax. That's a lot of money to be paying up front in closing costs. So you want to always make sure that you're including the transfer tax on your cost sheet. I only do a cost sheet if a buyer is cash. Otherwise, I want a cost sheet from their lender. But you will do seller net sheets. So you want to make sure that you're including that transfer tax in a seller net sheet. Any questions about that? Okay. 4G, possession. This is super important. You need to know this. Possession is to be delivered by deed, existing keys, and physical possession to a vacant property free of debris, with all structures broom clean at day and time of settlement, unless seller, before signing this agreement, has identified in writing that the property is subject to a lease, meaning there's a tenant in there. So of course it's not going to be free of debris. It's very important to keep in mind when you're listing a property as is, to make sure that you have something in your agreement that says property is being sold as is, and reference paragraph 4G, that what will remain in the house and that the house will not be broom clean or whatever it is, that you want to have that in the agreement in advance, and not find out the day of closing or the day before closing when you might do your walkthrough that the seller, or I'm sorry, that the buyer expected the house to be, fully cleared out. Just simply putting it in the MLS that the house is being sold has not been successful for me as a buyer's agent or even as a seller's agent. So you want to make sure that you're confirming that in this document or in an addendum that everybody signs and understands and agrees to. It's just super important that everybody's on the same page regarding this.
Is there a special form for that? Because, you know, I had that situation where estate property, basically nobody was alive from the estate. Nobody got anything. It was just full of furniture. There's just ways to, I mean, there's clothes, there's furniture, there's everything, junk in there. And I was going to make an enumeration of, you know, every bed that was left there, et cetera. So how do you deal with that?
I would say something, and again, I'm not a lawyer, so you might consult with a lawyer person to say this, but in the past, I have said things like buyer and seller acknowledge that at the time of this agreement, the contents, all the contents will be included, and the property is in the condition it will be in at settlement. You know, you want to just make sure that you're, you know, talk to me, or we will call our broker, Mike, and we will get the right verbiage. But you don't want to be a lawyer and just put any kind of verbiage in there. So I'm just going to counsel you to talk to the right people when the time comes. And make sure. So I would have it on the last page of this agreement to answer your question, or put it in an addendum, you know, that way. But either way, you know, an addendum to this contract is part of the contract. So you can put it on the last page under other. Does that answer your question? Awesome. Okay. I want people to recognize too, just because paint is the color on the walls, or building materials that might have been used in the house, whatever. Don't let your sellers leave a bunch of stuff in a basement or in a garage. Make sure that you're talking to them and you're having good communication early on in the process that, hey, buyer, would you want all these cans of paint? Because the last thing you want to do is have a final walkthrough on the day of settlement or the day before and find out that a huge thing, a huge rack of paint has been left somewhere. You know, a buyer may not want it, and paint is difficult to dispose of. So the colors on the wall, just because you love them, doesn't mean that everybody wants that. So every single item that's in the house, you want to be having that conversation with your sellers. You are to have this house completely removed of all possessions, and paint is a possession. Extra insulation hiding in an attic or whatever. You want to make sure that that house is empty unless otherwise agreed to.
I have some old televisions that I'm going to have to figure out what to deal with on one of the properties.
Yeah, it's a thing. It is. I mean, I also am of the opinion, and I think that this would probably be held up if somebody had an issue. Trash. Moving out and leaving an 8-foot long pile of trash in front of the house is not acceptable. That is still the property. The property is supposed to be devoid of all of that. Just remove. So save yourself the heartache, the headache, the tears, the stress, and make sure that your sellers understand if you've got a ton of trash, you need to take it with you. You should not leave that out there, because a buyer coming to their walkthrough, you know, what if, and I always like to use examples, what if the buyer comes and they're like, okay, we're okay with the trash, depending upon when is trash pickup. And some municipalities won't take big stuff. So then you've left the buyer that's just paid a ton of money for that house to have to deal with your garbage. It's just not okay. So you want to make sure that sellers understand. You know, you might say to the buyer's agent, hey, there's a little bit of trash out front. I know we're closing tomorrow, but trash pickup is in the morning, or trash pickup is on Friday and it's going to be picked up. Is that okay? If it's not okay, I would ask my client to send me a picture of it. Do the hard work so that you're not dealing with this kind of kerfuffle at the last minute over garbage in front of the house. Trust me, I've been there. Okay, paragraph 4H. If the seller has identified in writing that the property is subject to a lease, Possession is to be delivered by deed, existing keys, and assignment of the leases for the property, together with security deposits and interest, if any, at date and time of settlement. So basically, if you've got tenants in the property, everything transfers over to the new owner. That includes the security deposits, rent for the month that, maybe it's closing in the middle of the month. You owe that new buyer the rent for the rest of that month. Seller will not enter into any new leases nor extend any existing leases for the property without the written consent of the buyer. Once you go under contract, like if you're on the market and you're not under contract yet, yeah, lease that apartment or extend those leases or renew those leases, whatever. But once you're under contract, this is now, you can't act on behalf of who the new owner is going to be. You need to make sure that you're communicating with them. Buyer will acknowledge existing leases by initialing the leases at the execution of this agreement unless otherwise stated in this agreement. So when you've got this little box checked, it's basically saying that this is a tenant occupied property. You're going to add the PAR TOP addendum as may be making it part of this agreement. I'm not going to go through that document right now, but just keep in mind, if you are a buyer's agent and you've got an investor client that wants to look at multi-units or anything that typically would be possibly a rental, you want to be looking at those leases. I often really don't even make an offer unless I can get a copy of the leases in advance. Sometimes it might be a hustle because you've got a fast moving property that you want to make sure you get an offer in on time. So you might not always have that opportunity, but in any case, if there are tenants in the property, you want this addendum attached to this agreement. Any question there? It's going to outline the leases, how many apartments there are, what are the terms, are there pets, what are the deposits for each of those, so that you make sure all that is accounted for with settlement in a timely manner during closing. Paragraph 5, date and time is of the essence. Written acceptance of all parties will be on or before this date. This date can be kind of fluid a little bit because maybe you make an offer on Friday. They've got an open house on Sunday. Selling agent says they're accepting highest and best. Sometimes you can rush with this in a seller's market. I don't recommend that too much, but it can work to your advantage, especially if your offer is very strong. Maybe you're coming in high and you're coming in fast. You might say, look, I don't want you to have that open house. I want the seller to accept this before 9 a.m. on Sunday. You can do that. So this is what you're looking for. You want to have this document executed by that time. That being said, when this time passes, that means technically your offer has expired. So a lot of agents are going to tell you, update that date. You now have an expired offer. You might say, hey, we're willing to extend it, but to make everything kosher, you want to update this date here on line 52. Paragraph B, the settlement date and all other dates and times identified for the performance of any obligations of this agreement are of the essence and are binding. Moving dates around or whatever has to be done in a change in terms addendum unless it's the closing date and it's before the date that's on there, as we discussed a little bit higher. It's on or before the settlement date. You don't have to do a change in terms for that. The execution date of this agreement is the date when buyer and seller have indicated full acceptance of this agreement by signing and initialing it. For purposes of this agreement, the number of days will be counted from the execution date, meaning the next day is when the timelines start. Excluding the day of this agreement was executed and including the last day of the time period. All changes to this agreement should be initialed and dated. Once this contract is executed, I don't ever touch it again. I use addendums. When you're still negotiating things and it hasn't been fully executed, you can make some changes to these. But in my opinion, once it's fully executed, I don't go back and change anything to this. I will then use an addendum. Paragraph D, the settlement date is not extended by any other provision of this agreement and may only be extended by mutually written agreement by both parties. Certain terms and time periods are pre-printed in the agreement as a convenience to buyer and seller. All pre-printed terms and time periods are negotiable and may be changed by striking out the pre-printed text and inserting different terms acceptable to all parties except where restricted by law. So be really careful about changing certain dates. You can change timelines. That's usually okay. But I don't ever X out or strike out any language or anything in this contract, because lawyers smarter than me that are licensed to do this are the ones that have already approved this document. So I just never mark things out. And as we discussed earlier, if you're adding verbiage to the last page, you want to make sure your simple terms. You're not trying to be a lawyer. You're not trying to put legalese. You're just trying to use simple terms that everyone can agree to.
245.
What's that?
245.
Yes, thank you. That's what I was just about to say. I apologize, everybody. We got through only 2 pages, which is good. I like to take the agreement slow, but I have to be at the new building to meet with some vendors here at 3 o'clock. So I have to cut this short, 15 minutes, but it's just us. And this is recording, and we will be uploading this to the YouTube page. So I thank you so much, Mike, for showing up, and anyone else that's watching this, thank you so much. And if you have any questions, you know how to reach me, and I look forward to seeing you guys, and we will discuss page 3 and on next week.
Super. Thanks for your time.
Eric.
Good luck with the new building.